This one annoyed the whole time. So beautifully written. An MMO in 6 months? Honestly?
This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence.
Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be speaking about my favorite to least favorite books I've read so far in 2023. I'm going to tell you about my DNFs, I'm going to tell you about all of the books I've read. I don't tend to go in-depthly on this channel into the books that I don't like reading. Generally I just won't talk about them, I just sort of keep them to the side and hide them away because I don't like being negative and I don't want to criticize anyone and it's just not my thing usually. However, I saw that Leonie of the Book Leo fame, I love her, she's wonderful, I'll link her channel down below. I saw that she did a video similar to this. However, I did think it would be more spicy for my channel to go favorite to least favorite because I so rarely talk about the books that I don't enjoy. I believe it's 41 books here to tell you guys about. Here are all of my favorite to least favorite books I've read so far in 2023. I'm gonna lead this video by talking about all of the books I DNF'd so far this year. If I have DNF'd a book, it doesn't necessarily mean that I don't like it. If I'm not enjoying a book, I will DNF it. However, there are some good books on this list that I do want to get back to. But anyway, the first book that I'll bring up is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I kept getting recommended this book because I was watching TikToks on enemies to lovers romance books, and I've never really found an enemies to lovers book that I've actually liked, that I've actually thought was good, and this one gets recommended all the time. Started listening to it as an audiobook. I got like a chapter in or a chapter and a half in. The voice just wasn't to my taste. I wasn't hooked by the story. I didn't like the characters. Very quickly I was like, this is the love interest, like that. No thank you. But I didn't gel with the voice of it, so I decided to DNF it. The Very Secret Society of Witches by Sangu Mandana. I was so disappointed that I didn't enjoy the start of this book. There was nothing about the story that hooked me. This book should 100% be up my alley. It's witches. It's a cozy setting. Nothing about the story grabbed me. The stakes didn't feel interesting enough. Sort of lacked the emotional depth that I felt from a book like The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. So unfortunately, even though I was very much looking forward to this book, I ended up DNFing it because it did not grab me. This is Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. I picked this book up because it was a really big inspiration for The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which is one of my favorite books. I stopped reading it because I was briefly considering making a video where I read all of the books that inspired The Secret History. If you guys want to see that video, please let me know, because I paused reading this book so that I could make that video and then I never made it, and then I was like, I don't know if it's a good idea. Anyway, I got this far into the book. I'm really enjoying it. My favorite bookmark is still in this book. I do intend to finish it this year, but I got stuck because I had an idea for a video and then I didn't have the energy to film it because I was working on my novel. The Master of Jinn by P. Gilly Clarke. I started reading this in a reading vlog right before I went to Bellingen Readers and Writers Festival. This is another DNF through no fault of the book's own. I'm really excited to read this. I got like a chapter and a bit into the story. The voice seems cool so far. I'm interested by the setting. I honestly just ran out of time and I had to get through all of my required reading books for Bellingen. As you guys know, I love a gaslamp fantasy. My novel that I'm working on is loosely inspired by the 1920s. It is a gaslamp fantasy, and so I've been trying to read a bunch of them. I do want to get back to this. I'm excited to read it. The next one is The Little Friend by Donna Tartt, which I've been trying to read for over a year. I love Donna Tartt. My favorite book of last year was The Goldfinch. As I've already mentioned so far in this video, I love The Secret History. This book has a very different voice to it though than those other books. It hasn't quite grabbed me yet, but I'm determined to read it. I'm determined to get through it, but it's on the DNF list because I tried again at the beginning of this year and it just didn't work for me. And then the last one I DNF'd this year is a book by George Orwell, and it is Down and Out in Paris and London. I picked this up when we were in Tokyo. We were in Book Off, which is a secondhand goods and book shop. Started reading this and there's like a really confronting scene in this book, like in like the second chapter, like really confronting. Aside from that though, so far, really interesting book. It is a memoir, of course. It provides insight into Paris and London in the 1920s. I do want to finish reading it, but currently it's on the DNF list because I had more grabby books to read instead of this one. Now we're going to move on to the required reading books. So these 5 books are all the books I had to read for Bellingen Readers and Writers Festival. And I am not rating these books because I met, interviewed, chatted with, did a book quiz with these authors, and in case they stumble onto this video, I don't want them to feel judged, so I just feel funny about it. So these 5 books I'm going to tell you about, but I'm not going to give them a rating. I read The Bookbinder of Jericho by Pip Williams, Moon Sugar by Angela Meyer, Hovering by Rhett Davis, Bon and Leslie by Sean Prescott, and also The Stranger by Catherine Hoare. Moon Sugar, Hovering, and Bon and Leslie are all Australian lit fic, which isn't my typical genre that I'd usually reach for. However, I will say a special commendation to Hovering by Rhett Davis because I thought this book was really interesting structurally. I think it captured teenage voice very well. I think from a poetics angle, it's a really cool book. So I think he did a great job. Will also say The Stranger by Catherine Hoare, really enjoyed it. It was a breath of fresh air. It was a lot of fun. It's basically a Western with a 16-year-old female protagonist. It's a really interesting setting. Moving along, I'm going to start speaking about my 5-star books now. So kicking it off with my favorite book I've read so far in 2023, and that is... I don't have a physical copy of it yet. Please don't touch this exhibit. I've already spoken about it heaps so far this year. I love the motifs explored in this poetry collection. It made me cry reading through it. I thought it was so beautifully written. Loved it to bits. The book is out in September, I believe. Please go order it. It's great. Also, Jen has an amazing booktube channel, which you should check out. I'll link that as well in the description. Wise Children by Angela Carter. I finally read this book. I've had it on my list for ages. You guys know I adore Angela Carter. I love her purple prose. I love her description, the decadence of her writing. Wise Children was a really good book. I loved how it explored aging women and concept of performance, and thought it was really, really good and really loved it. Oh, the next one. Do I have it? Why am I cursed to always forget to bring a book? This is The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. I reread this for a reading vlog, cried while reading it, loved it. So beautiful, has aged so well. I love this book. 5 stars to The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Definitely stands the test of time. My next 5-star book was Stardust by Neil Gaiman. We read this as a part of our Patreon book club. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of our Patreon book club books on this list. I listened to the audiobook version. I listened to Neil Gaiman himself read it. Loved it. Really cool, like fairy tale-esque story, really beautifully written. I'm gonna try and breeze past this next section of books because they're all rereads that I've spoken about to death on my channel. The Graveyard Book was a reread for me this year. 5 stars, loved it. One of my favorite books of all time. T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland and Other Poems. This is my favorite poetry collection of all time. The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock is my favorite poem of all time. I reread this. Also, The Picture of Dorian Gray, which I reread basically every year. Also one of my favorite books. I also reread Mrs. Dalloway, which I loved. It's such a beautifully, interestingly written book. Of course, it's a book of the high modernist period. There's lots of stream of consciousness here. There's lots of really interesting literary techniques here. Loved this. Such a good book. Before I jump into the 4-star books, I just wanted to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Squarespace.
Squarespace is a website builder which allows people to create fabulous websites with just a few clicks of a button. Many of you are aware by now that my website was made through Squarespace. I love their platform. The site was so easy to set up in the first place, and it's also very easy to maintain and keep looking lovely. Squarespace uses Fluid Engine, which is a next generation website design system that makes it incredibly easy for users to unlock their creativity. If you're looking to make a website, head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/ChristyAnnJones to save 10% off your purchase of a website or domain.
We are now officially moving along to the 4-star books of this list, and I want to kick off by speaking about a research book. This is... what's the name of it? 20s London, Sex, Shopping and Suburban Dreams. I borrowed this from the library and it was such a helpful book. I've read so many books for Project Teacup. I've done a lot of research, as I've mentioned here and there. The setting is loosely inspired by the 1920s. There's a lot of books I've used for research which aren't on this list for this video that I've looked at, but I haven't actually read in totality. The most helpful book I've read though is this particular book. It gave such specific examples of what a person would see walking along a 1920s street, how much things cost, the details, the little tidbits that you would not get unless you were there, unless you saw it. It was perfect. It was exactly what I wanted. It was very interesting. The Emissary by Yoko Tawada. This is the first book I read this year. I started it when we were in Japan at the end of last year and then ended up finishing it at the beginning of this year. It's a really interesting speculative novel. It's a bit sad, a bit forlorn, but overall I really enjoyed it. it. I wish it was longer, which is why it's not a 5-star book, but it was a decent 4-star book for me. Haruki Murakami makes another appearance. This is Novelist as Vocation. This is a memoir by him. I've spoken about Haruki Murakami so much on this channel. I love him. I love the way he writes. Don't love all of his themes. Don't love everything he includes in his novels, but I love his books. If you're into writing, if you're an aspiring author, if you're interested in the way that writers live and work, I really recommend this book. I thought it was really good. Decadence, a literary history, edited by Alex Murray. I also borrowed this from the library. I'm really interested in decadence and this particular area of literature. So think like Oscar Wilde, that kind of time. The fin de siècle, the turn of the century writers. England was slowly coming out of the Victorian virtues, and books like The Picture of Dorian Gray were starting to get published. Anyway, I'm very interested in this time period and I enjoyed this book. It was a decent 4-star read for me. The next one is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is such a cozy, lovely book. It was a joy to read. It was so much fun. The reason it's not a 5-star book for me is because I didn't think the book had quite enough stakes. The world building I had questions about in little areas, but aside from that, it was just a lot of fun. It was a really cozy novel, solid 4-star read. The next one's a bit of a silly one. It's not really a novel, but it's like a coffee table book. How to Be More Paddington, A Book of Kindness by Michael Bond. I got given this for my birthday. I have an obsession with Paddington. Really excited to go to England one day and go to the Paddington shop, which is in Paddington Station. As soon as I realized that that existed, I got really excited. There's not a lot of story here, but the illustrations are very cute and I did enjoy it. The next 4-star book is Happy Place by Emily Henry. This is my highest rated contemporary romance book of all time. I will say again and again that I'm not typically a fantasy... I am typically a fantasy reader. I'm not typically a romance reader. And they are never ever above a 3 stars for me, but I still read them even though I know it's gonna be middle of the road. Happy Place, however, I did really enjoy. I liked the characterization. I thought it had a bit more depth than some of the other commercial romance I've read. I feel like Emily Henry is the least problematic romance author, like dedicated romance author. Like it's at the lower end of the 4-star category, but I did think it was really good. And I cried while reading it. I cried like twice. Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. It's a 4-star book purely because of nostalgia. Is it well written? Is it perfect in terms of its characterization and gender and all those different kinds of things? No, it's not a perfect book. However, I had a lot of fun reading it. I loved these books when I was like 14. I reread it for nostalgia purposes. I think there's elements of this book that are so silly. Like Edward is so silly, the whole thing. So it's 4 stars because it's not like an amazing book, but the experience of reading it was fun. If I'm really looking at it from a critical lens, it's probably like a 3-star book, but I enjoyed it, so it's sitting in the 4-star category. Oh, and then the final 4-star book I want to mention is Idle Burning by Rin Usami. We also picked this up when we were in Tokyo. Tyler picked this book actually, so technically this belongs to him. This is about a girl who is obsessed with an idol, like as in like Japanese like idol music. He does something wrong and then it sort of looks at her life and how she interacts with idol culture, and I found it really interesting. It's quite a short book, felt very realistic. I really loved the characterization of this. I wish it were longer, which is why it's not 5 stars. I wish there were some other little differences, but otherwise really enjoyed this book. I thought it was great. Moving into the middle of the road books. These are the 3-star books. These are the books that I thought were serviceable, but not amazing. They didn't blow me away. And the first one I want to talk about is Kai Kiyi by Vaishnavi Patel. I was so upset that this wasn't a 5-star book for me because I went in expecting it to blow me out of the water. I was like really excited for it. It didn't grab me. There was nothing about the story that really felt engaging enough to me personally. I thought the mythology behind it was really cool. I'm really excited to see what Vaishnavi Patel does next. This was her debut novel. However, for whatever reason, it just didn't perfectly speak to my taste. I really wanted to enjoy it, but it wasn't quite there for me. This is a spicy one. Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I loved, where is it? Babel by R.F. Kuang. I thought this was amazing. I loved the historical fantasy. I love how in-depthly it explored its theme. I thought there were some really wonderful things to this book. Really enjoyed Babel. Yellowface is the second R.F. Kuang novel I've read, and it broke a reading slump for me. So I hadn't read a book in like a month. After I read all those books for Bellingen, I didn't read another book for ages because I was working on Project Teacup and I felt so stressed. I started reading this book at the football while I was waiting for the game to begin, and then I finished finished it the next day. I think I finished this in like a 24-hour period. Really broke my reading slump. However, I basically finished the book and felt like I just spent a whole day reading Twitter drama. Like, I didn't feel good. Felt like I was watching a car crash over and over again. There were moments of the book that I enjoyed, moments of the book that I found interesting, and there were other moments that I felt were overwrought in different places. With Cindy, did an amazing review on this book. It was really in depth. I love the way she spoke about class and how class intercedes with publishing and race. I'm actually going to link it in the description down below because I thought that review was great. I wanted to love it, but it kind of just ended up being middle of the road for me. I'm going to check out more of R.F. Kuang's books because I loved Babel. I thought Babel was so good, but I wish I had have liked Yellowface more. Oh, and then I have 2 research books on here, which were just kind of middle of the road. Japanese demon lore, Oni from ancient times to the present, and also traditional monster imagery in manga, anime, and Japanese cinema. I think there was a 3rd one, Haunted Japan, exploring the world of Japanese yokai, ghosts of the paranormal. All of them just middle of the road. I enjoyed them. I didn't really learn very much from them. Oh, I forgot one of the books, Pandemonium and Parade, Japanese monsters and the culture of the yokai. Read this because I was interested in the topic. Didn't really learn heaps, but it was interesting enough that it's still like a 3-star book. Another Emily Henry. This one is Beach Read. This was fine. It was middle of the road. Again, just because of my taste, commercial romance doesn't ever tend to be above a 3-star for me. The fact that Happy Place was in the 4-star category is quite an outlier. So I read Beach Read. It was fine. It was fun. Yeah, it's just middle of the road. The next 3-star read is Cold Enough for Snow by Jessica Orr. This is maybe a bit out of left field. I know a lot of people love this book. This is a really popular literary book. It's about a woman who goes on a trip to Tokyo with her mother. Talks about their relationship as they're traveling through Tokyo, and it it won the Novel Prize. It's been really, really celebrated, this book, and it is very short. I expected to adore this book because it's right up my alley. I love pretty imagery. I love Tōkyō, so I was like, yes, this is perfect. Maybe because I had high expectations, maybe because I'd seen so many positive things about it. The book kind of let me down a bit. It didn't really feel like anything happened, and I am the patron saint of enjoying books where nothing happens. If it has good character, if it has good imagery, I'm gonna have a good time. I don't care if there's no plot. It's fine. I'll deal with it. However, maybe it's in part because I've spent so much time in Japan. The way this explored the setting of Tokyo, to me, was quite shallow. There was no specifics. It was just like, we went to a temple, we went to this place, we went to that place, but there was no like real exploration of the setting. I didn't feel transported there. I didn't feel grabbed by the story. I didn't feel grabbed by the characters. There were some beautiful moments, which is why it's still a 3-star book, but this one was just fine. Oh, this one, Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. I also expected to read this book because a lot of the booktubers that I enjoy watching who are into high fantasy, epic fantasy, commercial fantasy, that area, they really love this book. However, I picked up Nettle and Bone and it just didn't grab me. There was nothing really special about the story to me. I didn't love the voice of it. Again, it had some fun elements. It had some gothic, interesting, creepy elements to it, but I didn't really feel compelled by the story, and it wasn't amazing. Again, middle of the road. It was fine. It was serviceable. I finished reading it, but there wasn't anything really interesting to me about this book, which I'm really sad about because I really expected to enjoy it. The next one is Looking for Alaska by John Green. I do have a copy of this book. However, I'm not getting up again and running to that other bookcase for like the 5th time. Here's the cover of it. I reread this book as a part of that video where I reread Twilight and I reread The Perks of Being a Wallflower. This book doesn't really stand the test of time. There's some things in here that I think aren't amazing. I love John Green to bits though. I think he's such a talented author. I still watch Vlogbrothers all the time. Love him. He's amazing. This book, however, had some things that dated it pretty quickly. However, I did enjoy rereading it. I just didn't love it as much as I expected to, so it's going to sit towards the bottom of the 3-star category. And then moving along to the last book of the 3-star category, and this is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I was so disappointed that I didn't love this book. I was so disappointed. There were so many things here that I wanted to enjoy. Like, I didn't love the prose of the story. I didn't love the characterization of the story. I didn't love the way it handled some of its themes. There were just thing after thing after thing with this book that I thought could have been so much better in order to appeal to my tastes. I have a copy of this book. Why is it? Okay. I'm gonna blame Project Teacup. I'm gonna blame the fact that I basically haven't looked up from writing that novel in 2 weeks. I am tired. How did I forget that I owned this book? Oh, it's here! It's hiding! I do own a copy of this book, Emily Wilde. I really wanted to enjoy it. I think the cover's very cute. I think the subject matter is perfect. I love fairy folklore. I think it's so interesting, and I wish that I enjoyed this book, and I was quite sad that I didn't. It's at the bottom of the 3-star rung for me. Now is the time for me to get into the books that are particularly spicy, because these are the books I really didn't like this year. So I have two. I have two books that were in my nah category, and both of them are rated 2 stars. Here's the thing with how I rate books. I never give out 1 star. I think it comes from the fact that I know that writing a novel is really hard, and I know that it's really tough, and you know, it's such a big thing to do, and authors most of the time are not being paid very much money. The vast majority of authors, it's not their full-time gig, and writing a book is a very difficult thing, and I know that firsthand. So I never give out 1-star reviews, because most of the time when you pick up a book, it's got structure, it's got the plot elements, it's got the basic stuff that you need, right, in order to just sort of supersede that 1 star. So both of these books are sitting in the 2-star category. In order for a book to get this 2-star rating from me, it needs to have annoyed me in some kind of way, because I'm pretty generous with the way that I review books. The first one I'll talk about is The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. There were elements of this that were well written. I love the way the book looks. It's a very pretty cover. I love the unfinished edges. Gorgeous looking book. I feel like this man made it his personal mission to put in as much offensive shit into the book that he physically could have. And I've said so many times on this channel that I think it's really important that when we look at books that are published a long time ago, this book was published in the 1920s, that we look at these books through the lens of the culture and time in which they were written. It's important that we critique them and we look at the things that we value now, and we talk about these things, but these books are time capsules, whatever. However, this book just made me so frustrated. Like, there were so many moments of it being offensive in terms of gender, in terms of race, in terms of how it spoke about people. It's like every chapter it picked a different group of people. I do think that there's something interesting about the way that Hemingway writes, but I feel like it's this really kind of, I'm so sorry, please don't yell at me, literature bros, just something really up itself about the way that he writes, the short sentences that are so like arrogant. There's something about his writing that I find really arrogant. It's because I don't like the personality of the author, but I finished this book and I was just annoyed the whole time. I should have DNF'd it, but I didn't, in part because I had purchased the book, and I am very careful about the books that I buy. I don't tend to buy books unless I think I'm gonna like them. There are other books written in the 1920s that I will recommend first. Moving on now to the most divisive book of this entire video. This is my least favorite book I've read so far this year. This is the most frustrated I've been at a book in a while, and it is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I am so sorry because I know that I'm in a minority. I know that most people love this book. I've seen countless YouTubers who I love give this book 5 stars, adored it, ripped their heart out, they cried, beautiful characterization, all of this stuff. The thing that got me with this book that really frustrated me was the historical inaccuracies. And also a really big disclaimer here. I am aware that I am not in any way an expert on video game production. What I know is limited. What I know is based entirely off the fact that my partner is a video game developer, that I've seen him develop games, that I've watched the documentaries, a lot of the resources and references that Gabrielle Zevin mentioned at the end of the book in the acknowledgements. I've watched those documentaries, right? So I actually know the subject media. But given my limited understanding of how the games industry works in the 2010s and 2020s, this book had so many things that were incorrect that it basically felt like it was speculative or like it was just fan fiction. Thing after thing after thing after thing that did not make sense. Like the fact that the teacher at the school was telling students that they have to make their own engines, which maybe would have made sense back in like the 1990s, but telling people that, oh, it's fine, you can just code in this language and then you can code in that language. That's what a compiler is for. When, as far as I understand, a compiler is a thing that you need to program in order to speak between the two languages. So no, you can't just program in fucking Java and then C# and then whatever. They're not gonna... And honestly, the moment that really sealed it for me, and this is a very mild spoiler for a type of game that a character makes. So if you want to skip that very mild spoiler, please feel free to go here. A character in the story says that they're going to make an MMORPG, which is a massively multiplayer online role-playing game like Final Fantasy or World of Warcraft. I've been playing MMOs for the last like 9 years of my life. I like MMOs, they're great. They are the most complex games that you can make. And the characters in this story who have no experience in MMOs, no experience in life service games, just say, I think we can make an MMO in 6 months. An MMO in 6 months? Honestly, that is like someone saying, I'm gonna bicycle across the Sahara Desert. I think it's gonna take about 30 minutes. Like it doesn't. Maybe Second Life, maybe the MMOs of the early 2000s took a lot shorter, but I'm pretty sure World of Warcraft originally took like, what, 3 or 4 years originally around the same time period where this particular part of the story is set. And it just felt like the author didn't know what she was writing about. It felt like there wasn't enough research here. I just felt annoyed at everything in this book. Like the miscommunication trope being rife in this story. Yeah, as you can probably tell, I got so frustrated at this book. I really wanted to love it. This is why I left this book for the very end of the video, because I knew I was gonna get fired up about it again. Anyway, if you enjoyed this book, I respect your opinion so much. I have friends who love this book. They thought it was really, really wonderful and emotional, and it really spoke to them, but the whole entire experience of reading the book really annoyed me. On one hand, I can list the books that annoyed me as much as Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I have so much respect for Gabrielle Zevin. I'm excited to see what she does next. I think it was a really cool premise, but the book just wasn't for me. Anyway, those were all 41 or 42 books that I read so far in 2023. I hope you got some insight into some interesting books to read. I hope you enjoyed this video. I also wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone over on Patreon for supporting my videos so I can sit here and rant about things like historical accuracy. Over on Patreon, we have a whole bunch of lovely bonus content, bonus videos, writing updates, our book club, our private Discord server, lots of things. So if you're interested in checking out Patreon, please feel free to click the link in the description down below. Take care everyone, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.